Watch it because the title says it all. We need to talk about disabilities in fantasy. They're going to say the normal stuff. Representation doesn't matter. And here's all the reasons in specifically Dungeons and Dragons and certain fantasy worlds why a spell could fix your disability. When it comes to Dungeons and Dragons, with spells that can actually heal you, theoretically grow back limbs, that is an issue to be discussed. But especially if you're talking about a first level character, they may not have access to the resources that is necessary to cast that spell, and that may or may not be an appropriate use of time. Now, as for combat wheelchairs, there is a class artificer where you can make an armor that does replace your that can replace things like lost limbs, which could theoretically be minorly altered to give yourself a wheelchair when you aren't in armor. Like the Stanley superhero character that took place in modern day, the Acute. This particular character was given an armor by a mysterious figure after he lost his legs, and I believe his wife was killed when the fact that he was a mob lawyer came back and hurt him because he would defend people for money, not because they necessarily were innocent. A different superhero that's more or less an artificer, but instead of giving the armor, made it himself, was the character the Mantis in 90s TV. These are two disabled characters who were given something that allowed them to be heroes, even in their daily lives. They did have to deal with not having their legs. Professor X didn't have access to his legs except for occasional story arcs, but was a major player in the mutant fights and did have a technologically advanced wheelchair. The reason I bring this up is this idea is not new to the technology, but all of these characters were designed to add something to make them slightly different. Even if the Mantis and Accuser put them in the same category, it's a category of basically two. Where Professor X, again, it's his psychic stuff. He's a academic. He's a person based off of his intellect, not his physical needs for fighting. I bring all these characters up because the idea of playing a wheelchair combat person as some kind of artificer actually sounds fun. And I think you can use the story of this person trying to get the resources necessary to be able to get a spell cast that would actually fix their legs, and or deciding not to if they can use those resources in a different way. When it comes to fiction, I'm going to get to role playing games specifically in a minute. Representation of handicapped people or any checkbox group, it becomes a red flag when it sounds like that's the only thing you're talking about. Maybe we can get a general plot, but you're not telling us about the fun, you're telling us about the representation. It really limits your audience, for one. For two, you run the risk of patronizing your audience, even if you are part of that checkbox issue, if they feel like the character had nothing else and was pandering as opposed to a legitimate character that shared that trait with them. As for role playing games, yes. Theoretically, Dungeons and Dragons, you can get your hands on a spell that will give you the ability to walk back. There's resources involved with that spell. It's a third or fourth level spell, so if you're talking about first level spell, you may not be easily able to get it, which could be a story arc for an individual character. Or you can just have fun doing it. As for playing a character with a combat wheelchair, that sounds like it could be fun to me. Also, in Big Eye Small Mouth, for example, you can take You can actually take disadvantages to give you more resources to build a character because it's a point by system, and physical disability is one of them. But it's also a game where you can make a flying wizard or something. So, honestly, when it comes to anything when dealing with special needs in sci fi and fantasy, the simple answer is no, I'm not going to automatically dislike it or analyze it to see if there's a way for that character not to be in there if I like the character. But the bigger issue is make me like it. It is not my job to like what you're selling. It is your job to make me like it. And if I think somebody's unfairly judging you, that's why my channel is called Culture Wars Diplomacy, because I'm trying to be fair, even if I don't always agree with a person's position.